That day started out like any other for me. A busy afternoon juggling the daily grind of running my small marketing firm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and being a dad who tries his best to keep everything together for my daughter Emily. She was 7 then, and her little world revolved around school, dinosaurs, and asking a million questions about everything under the sun. Picking her up from school was the highlight of my day. I looked forward to it every afternoon, like clockwork. That particular Thursday, I was swamped in emails and phone calls from clients, trying to close a deal that could really push our company forward. I was supposed to leave the office by 3:30 p.m. to get to her school on time. The drive was usually a quick, relaxing 15 minutes, time to decompress and get ready to switch gears from businessman to dad mode. I remember glancing at my watch, realizing it was just about time to go, and telling myself, all right, let's get this done. So I closed my laptop, grabbed Emily's backpack I'd packed the night before, filled with her favorite snacks and a little dinosaur toy she always brought, and headed out the door. When I arrived at the school, the parking lot was buzzing with parents, kids running around, teachers chatting. I saw Emily standing with a few of her friends, her blonde curls bouncing as she laughed about something I couldn't hear. My heart swelled. That was my girl, happy, safe, surrounded by her little community. But then, as I started walking toward her, my eyes caught something that made the blood drain from my face. Across the lot, near the parking garage, I saw Claire. My wife, my partner of 12 years, was standing close to another man, a man I'd never met before. They were talking in low voices, too close, too intimate. She had that familiar smile she reserved for me, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at this other guy like he was the whole world. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself, maybe it's nothing. Maybe he's a client or a colleague. Maybe she's just helping him with something. But the way they stood, arms brushing, quick glances that lasted too long, something was off, real office. I forced a smile as Emily spotted me and ran toward the car. I scooped her up in a hug, laughing as she told me about her day, the new friend she made, the dinosaur sticker she earned for good behavior. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see Claire follow us. She didn't. That night, when we got home, the house felt empty. I didn't notice Claire anywhere. At first, I thought maybe she went out for a quick errand, but as the hours passed with no word or message, a sinking feeling set in. The next morning, the nightmare revealed itself. I walked into the kitchen to find a stack of unopened bills, past due notices for the mortgage, utilities, credit cards. The electricity was about to be shut off. The phone line disconnected because the payment hadn't gone through. I felt a cold sweat break out. Claire always handled the bills. That was her thing. She was meticulous with our finances, balancing the budget, paying the bills on time. But now it looked like everything was left undone. Worse still, when I logged into our business bank account, what I saw made my stomach twist. The account was almost empty. $60,000. Gone. Transferred out in several large sums over the past few weeks. The funds that were supposed to pay our staff salaries, vendor invoices, office rent, everything just vanished. I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling, staring at the screen in disbelief. I called Claire's phone over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. I checked her email and social media, hoping for any clue. Nothing. The house was eerily silent, except for Emily's soft breathing upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Then, late that afternoon, a text message came through from an unknown number. I opened it, heart pounding, and there it was. A simple sentence. I'm in Paris. I'm sorry, James. No explanation, no apology. Just those few words that cut deeper than any knife. It felt like a punch in the gut. Over the next few days, it became clear Claire had no intention of coming back anytime soon. Not just a trip to France, but a permanent break. She had left behind not just unpaid bills and emptied accounts, but also a trail of lies. Friends and colleagues told me she'd been seeing the man in France for months, hiding it from me, hiding it from Emily. The hardest moments came when I had to explain to Emily why Mommy wasn't coming home. She asked me with those wide, trusting eyes, "Daddy, where's Mommy? When will she be back?" I hugged her tight, swallowing the lump in my throat, and told her Mommy was away on a trip but loved her very much. How do you explain betrayal to a 7-year-old without breaking their heart? It wasn't just about money or business anymore. It was about the foundation of my family crumbling while I was doing the simple, everyday thing any dad would do, picking up his daughter from school. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I spent hours on the phone with banks, business partners, and lawyers, trying to understand what had happened to our life savings, to our company, to my marriage. I was drowning in uncertainty, but I had to stay strong for Emily. Every night I would sit at my desk, running the numbers, planning how to keep the business afloat, how to cover rent and groceries, how to shield my daughter from the storm. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but giving up was not an option. Because even when the person you trusted most disappears without a word, the real fight begins. Not just for money or stability, but for the soul of your family, for the little girl waiting at home who still believes that everything will be okay. That's when I knew this was only the beginning of a long, hard road. But I would walk it, no matter how tough, for Emily. Because in the end, she was all that mattered. When Claire left, it wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a total upheaval that ripped through every aspect of my life, especially my business. For years, Claire had been the financial anchor of our company, the one who kept everything organized while I focused on growth, client relationships, and strategy. She handled payroll, supplier invoices, tax deadlines, details I trusted her with implicitly because, frankly, I was never great at those things. I was the visionary, the salesman, the person who made things happen on the front lines. She was the quiet force behind the scenes. But the second she walked out that door and onto a plane bound for France with her new lover, everything began to collapse. When I first sat down at my desk the day after, hoping to catch up on emails and payroll, the silence was crushing. The familiar hum of the office felt eerily empty. Then I opened our company's online bank account, and my heart sank. The balance was decimated, almost $60,000 missing. Bill after bill marked overdue, payment deadlines ignored, contracts left hanging without the necessary deposits. I quickly realized she hadn't just taken money, she'd systematically drained the lifeblood from the business, probably to fuel her new life abroad. The weight of that reality settled on me like a physical force. I was overwhelmed by the mountain of work I'd never expected to handle alone. I had no choice but to dive into every financial document, every invoice, every transaction she had left behind. Hours turned into days of reviewing statements and calling vendors, trying desperately to explain why payments were late, why a long-standing client's check hadn't cleared, and why our phone lines were suddenly getting shut off. I was drowning in details I didn't know well, all while trying to hold my family together. But it wasn't just the money. It was the chaos that seeped into my professional reputation. I started hearing whispers in the business community, friends, clients, and competitors sharing rumors about the company in trouble. People I'd known for years suddenly viewed me with suspicion, questioning my ability to run the business or keep my personal life from spilling into my work. It was devastating. I'd spent decades building that company from the ground up, putting in more hours than I could count, sacrificing time with Emily and even my own health for something I believed in. And now, in the wake of Claire's betrayal, it felt like all that effort was being erased overnight. Every time my phone rang, I braced myself for bad news. A client pulling out, a vendor threatening legal action, or worse, a friend turning their back. I remember one call in particular from one of our largest suppliers. His voice was polite but firm, as he told me they couldn't keep extending credit without payment. That hit me hard. If I couldn't pay my bills, the entire supply chain for the business could grind to a halt, potentially ending years of hard work and tens of jobs in the community. That pressure was suffocating. Then came the emotional battlefield, the rumors Claire was spreading. She had this way of twisting the narrative, making herself the victim and me the villain. I started hearing from mutual friends that Claire was telling them I was a neglectful husband and a bad father, that I prioritized my business over Emily, that I was emotionally unavailable, and that she had no choice but to leave. It was painful, hearing people question my character and love for my daughter when all I'd ever done was try to provide for her future. These lies complicated the already tense custody conversations. Friends and family who once offered support now hesitated, unsure what to believe. That isolation made me question everything. And yet, through all the self-doubt and mounting pressure, I refused to crumble. I had to pull myself together. For Emily. I thought about her face when I picked her up from school and realized her mother was gone. about the confusion in her eyes when I told her Mommy had to go away. She was too young to understand why the world was suddenly so upside down, but I promised her one thing, that I would fight to keep her safe and provide the life she deserved. I poured myself into stabilizing the business, learning the financial ropes Claire had managed for so long. I hired an accountant to help untangle the mess and a lawyer to prepare for what was clearly going to be a long custody and divorce battle. I spent late nights in my dimly lit office, the glow of the computer screen illuminating the stack of unpaid invoices, bank statements, and legal papers scattered across my desk. I remember the loneliness, no family dinners, no weekend getaways, just endless hours of paperwork, phone calls, and strategy meetings with attorneys. There were nights when I just stared out the window, wondering how it all spiraled so far out of control. How did the woman I trusted with everything suddenly become my greatest adversary? But with each passing day, I grew more determined. The business had survived rough patches before, and so would I. My reputation would weather the storm, and most importantly, I would prove in court, and to the people who mattered, that I was the father Emily needed. Facing the fallout at home and work wasn't just about fixing a company or defending my name. It was about reclaiming control of my life and protecting my daughter's future from the wreckage Claire left behind. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was only the beginning. The days following Claire's sudden departure felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. At first, I was so overwhelmed with trying to keep the business afloat and take care of Emily that I barely noticed how much damage Claire had quietly done behind my back. But soon enough, the pieces started falling into place, and I realized that her betrayal was deeper and far more complex than a simple flight to France with some lover. I remember the night I first sat down with Mike, my accountant, in my cluttered home office. The overhead light buzzed faintly as we pored over stacks of bank statements, invoices, and credit card records. The weight of the silence between us was almost as heavy as the paperwork itself. Mike was as stunned as I was when we began to notice irregularities, transfers that weren't authorized, missing deposits, unexplained withdrawals. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Claire was managing things differently while I was buried in meetings and deadlines. But as we delved deeper, the picture grew darker. There were multiple accounts, offshore accounts to be precise, in Luxembourg and the Cayman Islands. Accounts under names I'd never heard of, tied to companies that existed only on paper. Claire had been systematically moving money out of our business and personal finances for months, possibly years, and I had been completely blind to it. What broke me was when I discovered the timing of these transactions. They accelerated in the weeks leading up to her departure. It wasn't just a desperate act of fleeing, it was a carefully plotted financial extraction designed to leave me bankrupt and powerless. As I sat there staring at the spreadsheets and wire transfer receipts, my mind flashed back to every time I'd trusted her with the financial reins of our company. Claire was the one who balanced the books, managed payroll, and dealt with vendors. She was the one I depended on to keep the business running smoothly while I focused on growth and client acquisition. Now, all of it had been a facade, and I was left to pick up the pieces. Then there were the emails. Oh, the emails. Late one night, Mike pulled up an old backup from Claire's company laptop and found a string of messages between her and a contact I didn't recognize. They discussed moving funds discreetly and ensuring no paper trail. There were mentions of setting up shell companies and even a casual note about starting fresh in Paris. Reading those cold, calculated words felt like being punched in the gut repeatedly. But the financial deception wasn't the whole story. As I sifted through texts and emails that Jackie, Claire's former assistant, had anonymously sent me, I uncovered something far more insidious. An emotional manipulation campaign designed to undermine me in the eyes of everyone who mattered. Claire had been quietly sowing doubt among our mutual friends, colleagues, and even family members. She portrayed me as distant, uncaring, and obsessed with work to the point of neglecting our daughter and her needs. There were detailed instructions in the messages advising people on what to say if I came up, painting me as the bad guy and Claire as the martyr. It was a calculated, cold-hearted effort to isolate me and tilt any custody battles in her favor. I kept thinking about the times I'd stayed late at the office, sure, but always made it a point to attend Emily's soccer games, school performances, and doctor's appointments. I'd arrange my schedule around her when it mattered most. And yet, Here I was, being recast as the villain in a narrative I hadn't even known was being spun. The worst part was knowing that this wasn't just Claire's plan. It was a coordinated effort with her new partner. The more evidence I found, the clearer it became that her lover was deeply involved in this web of lies and financial trickery. It was like watching the ground crumble beneath me as I realized how carefully orchestrated this all was. This discovery sent me into a tailspin for a while. I questioned everything, my judgment, my marriage, even my own worth as a father and husband. But amidst the storm, I knew I couldn't give up. Emily needed me to be strong. The business needed me to be smart. And most of all, I needed to reclaim control over my life. So I turned to Vivian, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being relentless and thorough. I needed someone who understood the stakes, not just the custody battle, but the complex financial machinations Claire had unleashed. Together, we started piecing together a legal strategy. We filed motions to freeze the overseas accounts, launched forensic audits on the business finances, and prepared to fight for full custody of Emily. The process was exhausting. There were endless phone calls to banks, legal filings, and meetings with financial experts. Each day brought new challenges. Claire's lawyer tried to discredit me by pointing to my long hours at work, and her allies in the business community whispered doubts about my character. But with every setback, I doubled down. There were nights I stayed up until dawn, going over the evidence, planning my next move. The whiskey glass on my desk was less a comfort and more a reminder that this battle was wearing me down, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Through it all, one thing kept me grounded: Emily. Every time I looked at her sleeping face or heard her laughter echo through the house, I remembered what I was fighting for. This wasn't just about money or pride. It was about securing a future for my daughter, where she wouldn't have to worry about betrayal or instability. Uncovering Claire's financial and emotional deception wasn't just a step in a legal process. It was a brutal awakening to the reality that sometimes the people you trust most can hurt you the deepest. But it was also a turning point, one that steeled my resolve to rebuild, reclaim, and protect what mattered most. The courthouse never felt colder than it did that morning. I sat there in the stiff wooden chair, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, heart pounding like a drum. Around me, the chatter of other cases, footsteps echoing in the hallway, and the rustle of paper filled the space, but none of it reached me. My world had narrowed down to one thing: the fight for my daughter Emily, and the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my family. Claire arrived late, looking as composed as ever, as if this courtroom drama was just another scene in her carefully scripted life. Beside her sat Rachel, the new lawyer Claire had hired. She had that polished, relentless confidence you see in courtroom dramas, the kind that made you feel like you were already on the losing side before the fight began. From the moment Rachel started speaking, it was clear this wasn't going to be just about custody or finances. She spun a story of me, James, the neglectful husband, so convincingly that some of the courtroom nodded in agreement. According to her, I was a workaholic who had abandoned my family emotionally, if not physically. She painted Claire as a devoted, desperate woman who had no choice but to leave the country to protect herself and our daughter. I wanted to scream at the injustice of it all. I was the one who had been picking up Emily every day, juggling late nights and early mornings to make sure she was never without what she needed. But that didn't matter here. Not yet. What made the day unbearable was the betrayal that came not from Claire, but from someone I'd trusted my entire life. My sister, Linda. I had always thought Linda and I were close, even if we'd had our disagreements. Family meant everything to me. But as she took the stand and began to speak, I realized how far that closeness had eroded. Linda's words were measured, her voice calm, but cutting deep. She described my obsessive work habits, saying I had been emotionally distant for years. She said I'd let the business consume me, leaving Claire to manage the household and the bills, and that I was now using the court system to punish a woman who had suffered enough. What hurt most was the subtle way she suggested I was unfit to care for Emily. The courtroom was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I saw some familiar faces among the spectators, old family friends and business associates, looking at me with uncertainty. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like the private struggles of my family were being aired out like some public spectacle. But I wasn't going to let Linda's testimony go unanswered. My attorney, Vivian, was relentless. She calmly cross-examined Linda, exposing inconsistencies and motivations behind her statements. I learned that Linda had her own resentments, old sibling rivalries, disagreements over the family business, and personal grudges that had festered for years. I realized that in the chaos of Claire's betrayal, a family war had quietly been raging beneath the surface. Vivian then shifted the focus back to Claire's financial misconduct. She laid out the evidence, bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, emails revealing Claire's secret plans, and testimony from Claire's former assistant, Jackie, who bravely corroborated my claims about Claire's deception. The judge listened carefully as Vivian explained why a forensic audit was necessary, to protect the business from further harm and to ensure that no assets were hidden or drained while the case was ongoing. When the judge announced the decision to grant me temporary full custody of Emily, relief flooded through me, but it was tempered by the understanding that this was only a temporary victory. The judge also ordered the freezing of certain business accounts, which was crucial to stopping Claire from causing any more financial damage. After the hearing, the emotional toll hit me hard. Sitting alone in the hallway, I felt the crushing weight of not just losing my wife, but also the betrayal of my sister, and the fracturing of what I thought was a solid family foundation. The battle wasn't just legal, it was personal and deeply painful. That night, back at my office, I stared at the mountain of paperwork and digital evidence spread across my desk. The emails, bank records, and witness statements formed a story of calculated betrayal and deception. I replayed the court scenes in my mind, the words exchanged, the glances between Claire and Linda, the cold stare of the judge. I knew this fight was far from over. There would be more hearings, more accusations, and more battles for custody and control of the business. I had to be ready, not just as a businessman, but as a father protecting his daughter's future. Despite the turmoil, I found a quiet resolve. I was determined to rebuild what had been broken, to prove that despite the lies and the betrayals, I was the steady force Emily needed. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about who stood by you when everything else was falling apart. And I intended to be that for Emily, no matter what it took. After the chaos of the emergency hearing, when the judge had finally issued temporary custody and frozen some of Claire's known accounts, I thought I had uncovered most of the story. I was wrong. What came next was a revelation that shattered every assumption I had about my wife, my family, and the life we built together. Marcus, the digital forensic expert Vivian brought in, was a no-nonsense kind of guy. I remember sitting in that cold, sterile conference room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, while he methodically laid out the results of his deep dive into Claire's digital life. What Marcus found was like peeling back the layers of a conspiracy that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. Encrypted emails between Claire and Pierre, a man I'd never heard of before, her lover, and, as it turned out, a key player in this betrayal, were uncovered. These weren't casual conversations. These were detailed exchanges planning the movement of large sums of money from our company's accounts into a labyrinth of offshore accounts set up under shell corporations in Luxembourg. The purpose? To completely siphon off the business's finances without any trace. The emails described fake contracts, falsified invoices, and phony suppliers. Methods designed to make the transactions look legitimate on paper. Claire's meticulousness stunned me. She had orchestrated this over many months, while I was busy managing day-to-day operations and trying to keep the company afloat during the turmoil. Every dollar missing from our accounts was part of a calculated effort to financially ruin me and set herself up comfortably abroad. The betrayal didn't stop with Claire. Marcus's investigation revealed my own sister, Linda, had been complicit. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Linda had access to our financial records and had helped Claire hide these transactions. Our family gatherings had always been a delicate balance, but I never imagined Linda would turn against me like this. The emails showed Linda facilitating Claire's access to the company's finances, even providing passwords and instructions on bypassing security measures. I sat there, stunned, as Marcus laid out the full extent of the fraud with graphs, timelines, and bank statements. The scale was staggering. Over $150,000 had been diverted into these secret accounts, and every trace had been carefully erased or masked. This was no simple case of abandonment or financial irresponsibility. It was outright criminal conspiracy, and it felt like a personal attack designed to strip me of everything I had worked for. The strain was crushing. I spent endless nights awake, sifting through documents with my lawyer Vivian, strategizing how to use this evidence to fight back. I was juggling phone calls with bank investigators, coordinating with authorities in Luxembourg, and handling frantic emails from worried clients and employees at the company. The local business community was buzzing with rumors about Claire's disappearance and my supposed neglect. Some people doubted my story, making the legal battle even harder. At the same time, Jackie, Claire's former assistant, who had grown uneasy with what Claire was doing, came forward with her own evidence. She revealed another layer of the plan. Claire and Pierre intended to relocate permanently to Europe, leaving me with the debts, the broken company, and the custody battle for Emily. Jackie handed over bank statements for an additional secret account in Switzerland, where the bulk of the stolen funds were hidden, beyond reach of initial court orders. With this new evidence, Vivian filed emergency motions requesting immediate freezing of all discovered accounts and a court order preventing Claire's international travel. We also pushed for an investigation into Linda's role in facilitating the fraud. The situation was escalating fast, turning from a custody dispute into a full-blown criminal investigation. In court, Marcus presented the hard facts. He demonstrated the encrypted files, the shell companies, and the layers of deception Claire and Pierre had used. The judge listened intently, her face growing more severe with every detail. The courtroom, packed with my supporters and a few curious reporters, was silent but tense. It was clear that this wasn't just a broken marriage or a bitter divorce. It was a calculated crime against me, designed to erase me financially and emotionally. The judge granted broad powers to investigate further and ordered a full forensic audit of the company's finances. The court also issued restraining orders against Claire and placed travel restrictions on her and Pierre, ensuring they couldn't flee before justice caught up. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. The truth was out. The conspiracy had been exposed, and the law was finally on my side. But this was only the beginning of a long and painful road ahead, one where I had to rebuild my business, protect my daughter, and restore my family's future from the ashes Claire and her accomplices left behind. The court ruled in my favor. Claire's assets were frozen, custody granted to me, and criminal charges filed. Rebuilding the business took time, but step by step, I restored stability. Emily and I moved into a new home, planting a tree that marked our fresh start. Despite the past, we found hope and strength together.